course, the child goes to the teacher who will guide that child.
What do you mean by external moral authority? You use that expression a lot.
Materialism has to do with when you are
Hello, it's great to have all of you back for this course in Values and Spirituality. We are on book number 2 and more specifically page 31 of book number 2. Today we will be looking at 2 aspects. The first is to be dispassionate in the face of success and failure, praise and blame, good and bad situations. For those of you who are just joining us, today we are covering the third aspect of strategies for improving personal relationships. We covered the first 2 in a previous episode. Sister Denise, thank you so much for joining us in the studio.
Thank you very much.
This title is very familiar to a lot of Hindu viewers, isn't it?
Most definitely, yes.
Mm.
You know, this number 3 is one of the direct quotes from the Bhagavad Gita, and people are here in India are surrounded by different aspects of the culture and the religion, and there are many things from the Bhagavad Gita which are part and parcel of everyday life. People don't even realize where it comes from, and this is on an international level. So the concept of and the direction, the idea of being dispassionate in the face of success and failure, praise and blame, good and bad situations is something that's really hard to do.
Yes. If one is not familiar with the Bhagavad Gita and you read this the first time, you will think this is not even possible.
It involves a lot of practice, and more than that, it involves really understanding there's a spiritual law behind this, that if you're not dispassionate, you'll be in this swing of up and down and mood swings and all of the things that one associates with psychological dysfunctionality. So this is a really good practice to bring in stability. And of course we're in a very materialistic world in which people really go for feelings, and they like the good ones but they don't like the bad ones. And what the spiritual law says is, if you're going to be like that, and you're going to nurture yourself from all the good things, the corollary of that is you are going to have to eat humble pie, you're going to have to take the rough with the smooth, and to mitigate it and ease the situation through the ups and downs of life, this practice of moving away from the euphoria and the depression that people are so used to, through the practice of dispassion and being equanimous in the face of good and bad.
You go on to say, with the help of meditation, become sufficiently silent and detached to be free from illusions of sensory information, even though it often contradicts your sense impressions. I want you to give us a practical example of this to show viewers what you mean. Let us use the failure, for example. If you failed at something, how do you not sink emotionally when you failed at something, or when you've been defamed, or when you've lost somebody you love?
Okay, those are 3 fairly different examples. Let's look at you fail. Very often failure has to do with competition. It could be a game, it could be you're competing for a professional position and the other person gets selected, and then you develop the feeling of rejection. You start to think, maybe I'm not that good. You start to worry about what other people will think about you. You start to see people looking at you with that eye that, oh, you know, this one not that good. And you have to manage these feelings, which are all inside you, and they're not realities. It's something that corresponds to thought. Now, what meditation and spirituality teaches us is that our thoughts are things that we create and that we have to select. So when there is an event that happens, I failed to get the position, the other thoughts that come happen at the same time as feelings. So the feelings produce thoughts, the thoughts produce feelings, and you go in a downward spiral. Spiritual knowledge can come to the rescue and say, you know, the fact that this person got selected neither proves nor disproves that you are worse than that person. And if you are comparing yourself with another person, favorably you get arrogant, unfavorably you get depressed, and that is a trap. So you have to really bring these thoughts into your mind so that you don't fall into those traps of negative thoughts or unrealistic thoughts. And this is a discipline. When you lose someone, here you have to practice remembering that you have actually no control over life and death. You have no control over whether somebody stays with you or leaves you. There's a lot that you can do, but ultimately you have to accept. So situations like that are very good for us to develop the practice of acceptance, which is a very good quality, and to also break apart the illusion that I control what happens in the future. That's a huge illusion. Just because you would like to doesn't mean that's a reality. So all of these practices are to get us to be really realistic. And that doesn't mean that we become cold, but it means that our emotions don't run away with us, and that we're not living on a roller coaster, because usually what people prefer to the highs is something more like serenity.
That sounds very attractive, spiritually attractive.
Because you are wanting, in spiritual practice also, you're wanting to assert the fact that I am independent of what happens. And so this practice of detachment, going for serenity, going for an even keel, means that your life is going to be a relatively smooth track, and you will arrive at the end of your life in a good condition, offering a great legacy to future generations, and your karma will be the best that you can do. Because whenever we're into the roller coaster of the up and downs, invariably it makes us do karma that we have to pay for rather than karma that brings us profit.
I would now like to go to the bottom of page 31. You say something here that has to do with the law of karma that very few people are familiar with. If you sustain yourself with praise, the law of equals compels you to accept defamation to the same extent. That's quite a shocker.
It's a wonder about the law of karma. It just likes everything to be even. So if you go like this, then it's going to make you have to go like that. So you like the highs, but you have to understand the price of that high is you go way down low. And this is something that comes up a lot in addiction. You know, that the person feels low, so they want a high, they get a high, and every time they get a high, the low that follows it is lower, and the next high is never as high as the previous one. So you're running after something that you can never get.
Well, let's go on to number 4, which is contained on page 32. Do not judge things or people by appearances. Everything has a deeper meaning. Every bad situation contains a hidden blessing. You go on to say, the ongoing work is to question sense impressions, practice listening to your moral conscience and the inner voice of reason, and to follow what you know, not what you feel. What strikes me as extraordinary about that last bit is that it is advocated by many to listen to one's inner voice and to trust your feelings, to trust your intuition. And what you are saying is follow what you know, not what you feel. Why is it that you should go with the former and not the latter? Where's the danger?
Your feelings cover a pretty wide spectrum. You have finer feelings at one end of the spectrum and really base feelings at the other end. So when you use the word feelings to cover that whole spectrum, it's a bit too broad of a generalization. And what we're trying to do here is give a lot of importance to what you know, on the grounds that mostly your feelings operate in that base emotion level. Now, what happens when you cultivate your meditation, your spiritual side, your finer feelings get activated and refined, and then what you know and what you intuit and what you feel, they all come together. And this is really where we want to be. But we don't start off there. So when it comes to practice, the tests that we get are about getting deceived by appearances. And so we have to work through that and shift our positioning on that spectrum so that the place where we operate most of all is that we don't get fooled by appearances at all, and we're moving further and further towards the finer feelings, and the phenomenon of deception follows us. So we keep going towards this point where knowing and feeling and intuition is all one thing, but the force of negativity, the force of deception is going to constantly interfere with it. So you have to be on the lookout.
On the subject of feelings, just because something feels good does not mean that it is good for one, does it?
We see this very often with food, and a person who has so much discipline that they will only eat what is good for them is quite rare. Usually, especially nowadays, people are very conscious of the importance of diet and their health and well-being and so on. But you go to a celebration and something nice and juicy and tasty comes, and you know that your doctor has told you, well, you can't have that because it's really not good for your condition. But then you see there is a tussle between what you know is good for you and then your desire, your willingness to be part of everybody. It's a special occasion. So then you do it, and then the next day you pay for it. And so many people are caught up in this, and I think we have to ultimately make a decision that which side am I going to be on. And a lot of times people don't want to make a decision like that, and they like to stay both sides of the fence, and they are ready to pay. And then it starts to, you start to see, well, how much am I paying and what am I getting in exchange for what I pay? And there comes a point where what you get is you have to pay such a high price for it that you don't go with it.
You go on to say something that's really quite interesting. What you know does not fluctuate, whereas your feelings fluctuate enormously. We don't really pay much attention to this because our feelings are very important to us. Sister Denise, many people think I am the sum total of my feelings.
That's absolutely right. Different people operate in different ways. Some people are very much head people, some are heart people. You know, and the heart people are all about feelings, and the head people are more, you know, structured, and they're concerned with knowing. And everybody's a little bit of everything. So I think part of it involves you have to understand yourself. If you say, okay, I'm a feeling person, you have to take a look and see, well, I want to have an equilibrium between what I know and what I feel, so that what I know informs what I feel, and what I feel it gives a dimension to what I know, so that I'm not just cold, hard and calculating, because that is also a bit inhuman. So I think it's all about the balance. And if we say, okay, I'm a heart person, I plan on being a heart person, but I don't like to get hurt, you know, because if you're all feelings, you easily get hurt. So then you still have to do a bit of adjusting so that you're able to maintain your sensitivity but not be vulnerable. There's a lot of calibrating involved, and this process of calibrating is your spiritual effort, I think.
You later speak of looking beneath the surface with your discerning inner eye. That's a lovely expression. Could you tell us what you mean? Are you referring to the third eye that is spoken of in spiritual circles?
The third eye is a wonderful thing, and it refers to the capacity to know things that cannot be known via sense perception. So it has to do with intellectual capacity, which is beyond just human, scientific, philosophical playing. It was a very, very discerning intellect. And also the third eye has to do with being able to perceive things that can only be perceived by the mind and not by the sense organs. So it's very special, and I think that I would say that your discerning inner eye is an attribute of your developed third eye, yes.
I see. What comes up towards the end of this segment is an age-old adage: everything happens for the best. And while a lot of us may understand this in theory, understanding it when adversity strikes is tough. What makes you so sure that this is the case? Because there are people watching you right now who have faced overwhelming loss and shocking amount of pain on all levels, and you're saying everything happens for the best. Best of what?
You hear this a lot, and most people, when they hear it, they say, no, I don't agree. But a little while later they might themselves use that phrase, especially when they're trying to console somebody else. So when a person is in the intense feelings of the loss or the pain or the horror, the trauma, and their intellectual capability will look at this and say, how can you say that this is for the best? As you say, best of what? And it's really in hindsight that a person may be able to discern, well, if this hadn't happened, then these other good things wouldn't have happened. And I've managed to get through this bad thing, and I'm enjoying the fruits of these good things. So from that angle, I would say, yep, it is for the best. But it doesn't feel like it at the time. So I think that it's good to have this idea in the back of your mind, and it has the capability of, I think, calming some of your very strong reactions and emotions when something bad does happen, because that little phrase will come in to create some sort of a balance in your mind, that on one side all this really bad thing is there, and on the other side there's this little feather pressing on that, saying, you know, something good is going to come out of this, so don't worry. I think it prevents us from getting desperate and then acting in a desperate way, which would be regrettable.
The virtues that you mention at the end of this is quite sage advice. Be patient, avoid hasty reactions and quick judgments, and discover the beneficial attributes of any situation. This appeals to one's innate sense of wisdom, doesn't it?
Well, it does. I don't know how innate wisdom is. I think it's really acquired.
Really? I thought it was innate, but in any case, tell us about the rest of this.
There's another little phrase that seems to go with that, and that is that every cloud has a silver lining.
Yeah.
And when we're looking at a situation or going over it, remembering it, because the negative created a huge impact on the mind, our attention goes to that aspect of it. And when you think about the other side of the coin and look for the silver lining in this cloud, it again brings you into balance. But why I say that wisdom is acquired is because doing that doesn't come naturally, and it doesn't come easily. It's really a discipline that you have to do. And I think that as you proceed over your whole lifetime with this kind of study, as you grow, as you mature, as you pass through many, many situations, and you become really aware of the way life is, I think that that's when the wisdom comes. But I think wisdom doesn't come unless you're really prepared to work with each and every situation, to work out your relationships. Then only you reach that point that is described as the wisdom of advanced years.
Sister Denise has given us steps and methods as to how to achieve this. And what I really took from today's talk is that one of the aims of spirituality is to come to a state of equilibrium. And that means your highs are not that high and your lows are not that low. And very realistically, Sister Denise said to us that this takes a lifetime of practice. So do not expect to become this tomorrow. A very powerful lesson, and I think when one starts to practice this, you realize that it's spiritually safe to be this way. So thank you, Sister Denise.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us. I do hope to see you soon for the next episode. Take care and goodbye.